The leaders of NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Alliance, just finished their annual summit in The Hague in the Netherlands as Ukraine continues its existential fight against Russia's full-scale invasion that began more than 3 years ago. That invasion, preceded 6 years earlier by the capture of Crimea and parts of eastern Ukraine, set off the biggest war in Europe since World War II. Expert estimates and leaked data have put the number of Ukrainian soldiers killed at 80,000 or more, and the Ukrainian civilian death toll at more than 13,000, with 33,000 injured. The Center for Strategic International Studies in Washington recently estimated that as many as 250,000 Russian soldiers have died in Ukraine, and more than 700,000 of them have been injured. The Trump administration says it wants to stop the fighting, but preliminary talks so far have been unsuccessful, though they have led to prisoner swaps that have released the largest number of prisoners of war to date. How do Ukrainian leaders see the outcome of the NATO summit? What are the prospects for negotiations? And how are Ukrainians faring in the meantime? And what about relations between Ukraine and the United States under this new administration in Washington and with its European partners? This is the Just Security Podcast. I'm your host, Viola Ganger, Washington Senior Editor of Just Security. And to discuss these questions and what's ahead for Ukraine, we're joined today by the Honorable Alexei Goncharenko, a member of Ukraine's parliament, the Verkhovna Rada. He's a member of the European Solidarity political group in parliament and a member of the Budget Committee. He also serves as president of the Committee on Migration, Refugees, and Displaced Persons in the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe. MP Goncharenko is joining us today from Strasbourg, France, where he's attending the PACE Summer Session, the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe. And joining me in co-hosting this episode is Lauren Van Meter, who is in Lviv in Western Ukraine as we speak. Lauren is a guest author at Just Security and a former director at the National Democratic Institute and former associate vice president at the United States Institute of Peace. She's a non-resident senior fellow at the Atlantic Council's Eurasia Center and an adjunct professor at the Elliott School of International Affairs at the George Washington University. She's a longtime Ukraine expert and has most recently supported local women's organizations in Ukraine, providing humanitarian support to communities on the war's front lines. MP Goncharenko, thank you so much for joining us. Let's start with the situation in Ukraine. First, can you briefly outline for us the state of the fighting currently, the condition of Ukraine's forces and weapon supplies? Where geographically have they been most successful and where are they struggling?
In general, the situation is next. Ukraine is now in defense. Russia is trying to advance on all parts of the front line. They have some successes, and the most endangered parts now are the most northern part. It's Sumy region. It is near Russian Kursk region, where Ukraine still control a very small part, but still controls several square miles of Russian sovereign territory in Kursk region. And Russia is attacking and trying to get closer to the regional center city Sumy. And during last week, Ukrainian forces stopped Russians, but there is a heavy fighting there, and Russians are dangerously close to Sumy. Speaking close, it means that they can use FPV drones to attack the city and to terrorize people, civilians there, and that is really very, very hard for people. One more very difficult part of front line is near Pokrovsk. It's near the administrative border between Donetsk and Dnipropetrovsk region of Ukraine. Russians try to enter Dnipropetrovsk region. So if they will succeed, it will mean that they entered the seventh already Ukrainian region from the beginning of war in 2014. So that's important for them politically, and they are aggressively trying, not counting their losses, to get in Dnipropetrovsk region and to try to take the city of Pokrovsk, which is situated on the strategical road. to Dnipropetrovsk region and to city of Dnipro. These probably are two most difficult parts of front line, but the situation is quite hard everywhere.
Yeah, that's understandable. What's your sense of how are Ukrainians faring through this?
Oh, definitely. So we are tired, we are exhausted. The situation is not the best, but we know what we are fighting for. We clearly know, we are saying when Ukrainians are fighting against Russians, thousands die. When Ukraine is occupied by Russia, millions die. So we know this. Russia organized genocide against Ukrainians already 90 years ago, it was. And we clearly know what they will do. And now they organize a new genocide. We clearly know what will be the consequence of defeat. So we are fighting and we will continue to fight as long as it will be needed. But definitely we are tired and we are exhausted and we are looking to have more support from our allies.
MP Huntarenko, in the last few weeks, we've seen that Ukraine and Russia have conducted a series of prisoner swaps. The swaps have returned the most seriously wounded to Ukraine, and happily another group, the youngest prisoners of war, have also returned. These groups include defenders of Mariupol and the Azovstal iron and steel plant, the site of that iconic months-long siege of Ukraine's southern port city in 2022. So may we ask you, do you think these exchanges can create the basis for negotiations between Russia and Ukraine on other issues? And if so, what might those issues be?
It's today again, it was one more prisoners exchange. So that is important. But I don't think it leads us to some bigger breakthroughs in peace establishing, in achievement of peace. Unfortunately, I think Russians feel themselves emboldened now. I understand that President Trump wants peace, but to achieve peace, he chose the way trying to convince Russia, trying to be neutral in this situation. But I think that it is mistake. I think it will never lead to result because the only language Russia understands is the language of strength, the language of force. So in order to have Russia at real negotiation table with real will to find solution or to at least to freeze the conflict, Russians should be hardly punched. That's the only way. So before President Trump and United States will put a real hard pressure on Russia, there will be no real negotiations. And Russians will continue, and they are quite open in this, At the beginning, they played this game, so we want peace. But when Ukraine said, okay, let us stop fighting right now, let's have an unconditional ceasefire today, from that moment in March, they are looking for all the time for some, oh no, we can't because of this, because of that. But recently, they started to speak openly. They are saying, for example, press secretary of Putin, Peskov, he said, why should we stop the war when we advance? It was quite clear. And that's what Putin says, but not in such clear words, but exactly the same idea. We advance, we're taking new territories, we don't want to stop. And they will not stop. And when President Trump said in Hague that Russia has territorial ambitions beyond Ukraine, this is exactly true. So it means that Russia is an aggressor. Aggressor never stops himself. Aggressor only can be stopped.
I'd like to turn next to the economic situation in your country. We know that Russia's invasion of Ukraine continues to cause staggering losses to Ukraine's economy. Poverty has risen since the beginning of 2022. In fact, the World Bank estimates some 9 million Ukrainians now live below the poverty line. And yet there's also significant resilience. Children are attending school. We see social services and healthcare still running, still being effective. Where do you think the economic impacts of the war are most being felt today in Ukraine? And which populations would you say are the most vulnerable?
It's a very good question. Ukraine is very dependent from financial support today from the West. Our economics gives us possibility to finance our army, so which makes near 50% of Ukrainian budget. All other funding is coming from the West. So from one point of view, and one more additional thing, many countries of the West, they do not allow Ukraine to use their funding for military purposes. So it means for us, it's very important to keep economics afloat, because we can finance our army and our defense only by our own money, which we earn. So it's important to continue to earn this money and to support economics. Thanks to Ukrainian businessmen, Ukrainian employee, our economics still work. We have a big export, first of all, agriculture, but not only. Very important here is Odessa and the fact that Ukraine opened the Black Sea, because this is vital for Ukrainian economics to open the ways for agricultural export. It's also very important to the world, because food security of the world is dependent from crops from Ukraine. So yes, this is a big issue. Many people live in poverty. Unfortunately, that's true. I can tell you that very important is resilience of Ukrainian people and mutual support of people. A lot of is done by volunteering organizations, charity foundations and organizations, international, but mostly Ukrainian. And I have my own experience. I have found and run the biggest in Ukraine network of educational cultural centers, which are called Goncharenko centers, 41 centers throughout the whole country for education and culture. And we continue to operate. All our courses are free of charge for adults and children. So we are a kind of a drop in this ocean of Ukrainian social volunteering. And this is a very important factor of Ukrainian resilience.
So let's turn to this week's NATO summit in The Hague. MP Honcharенko, how do you feel about how that turned out for Ukraine?
I think it's better than we were afraid of, but definitely it's not what we were expecting a year ago in Washington during last summit. What do I mean? We did not receive an invitation to NATO, and that is bad. But it was already clear for quite a long time that it wouldn't happen. But at the same time, we have a good things because the decision to increase the spending on defense for NATO member states is very important. First of all, because it makes NATO stronger and more resilient against Russia and other adversaries. But also there is an important part of this decision that money which the NATO member states provide to Ukrainian defense capabilities account into their share of GDP spent on defense. So we hope that it will lead to increase of military support to Ukraine from, first of all, European countries. Probably it's not about the United States, but it's about European countries. And that can have a serious positive consequences for Ukraine and strategical ones for years ahead, at least medium term, not just short term, but medium term. Second important thing is that Russia is mentioned in the decision as a long-term threat to NATO. And this is good. And that shows that despite rhetorics, NATO member states, including United States as the main country, understand that Russia is a long-term threat. So I'm cautiously optimistic about the results of Hague Summit.
MP Honcharенko, earlier you discussed the impact of the policies of the Trump administration, which in your opinion have emboldened Russia. Yeah, in the US, we also see Senators Lindsey Graham of South Carolina, a Republican, and Richard Blumenthal, a Democrat from Connecticut, have showed bipartisan support for Ukraine by championing legislation for stronger sanctions against Russia by targeting its energy exports in an effort to leverage Russian participation in the negotiations. In fact, they were in Ukraine at the end of May to promote their effort, and the legislation now has 82 co-sponsors in the Senate. My question to you is in two parts. Do these sanctions sound to you like they would be effective? Are they that punch you think that Russia needs? Second, what do you think about the role the US Congress is playing in relation to Ukraine right now?
Yeah, I would like to thank Senator Lindsey Graham and Senator Blumenthal and all other senators. As I know, 81 senator from 100 signed the bill, and this is very impressive. And I don't know, are there many topics in the United States right now that can unite such a big majority of American senators from both parties? So it is important. It is impressive. The problem is that it is a bill, not a decision. The problem is we can't understand where is position of U.S. administration, President Trump's administration. Recently, State Secretary Marco Rubio commented, and he said that how you imagine that we will punch Russia with the heavy sanctions when we try to establish peace. It's kind of another attitude because, like recently, United States punched Iran to achieve peace. So with Iran, United States understand that the only way for such countries, the only language they understand is language of strength, peace through strength. But with Russia, there is a different attitude and different approach. I don't know why. And again, I think it is a mistake. And as a result of this mistake, Russia is emboldened. Putin becomes more aggressive, both in rhetorics and in his attacks against Ukraine. June will be one of the worst months during the war with the number of civilian casualties because of Russian attacks on Ukrainian cities. So this is very disturbing. So I think it's time to start to move this bill. I think this bill can be super effective. I think that if President Trump will start to move this bill, Putin will change his behavior immediately. And then it can be a real result of what President Trump is looking forward. I mean, peace and freezing of this conflict. So that's what I think. Congress is important, but we understand that at least for the moment, President Trump has a superpower in the United States. So I don't think that Republicans in the Congress will seriously argue with President Trump. I hope, and I don't want I'm not coming into internal politics of the United States. It's up to American people and American politicians to decide what to do. But I hope that American congressmen and senators are trying to convince President Trump and administration to change their approach.
So it's really important to have your perspective on that. I want to turn to the Parliamentary Assembly of Council of Europe now. As we noted at the beginning of the conversation, you're in Strasbourg, France right now, attending that assembly. The Council of Europe promotes democracy, human rights, and the rule of law, and includes the European Court of Human Rights. And it has commendably set Ukraine as its priority issue, which is interesting. So President Zelensky yesterday signed an agreement there with the Council of Europe's Secretary General Alain Berset to establish a special tribunal for the crime of aggression in Strasbourg. The crime of aggression is the international crime when one country illegally uses armed force against another to violate their sovereignty, territorial integrity, or political independence. In other words, Russia's invasion of Ukraine. What do you see as the biggest hurdles to ensuring the effectiveness of that tribunal?
Yeah, it was quite a historic moment here yesterday in Strasbourg, signing of agreement and beginning of establishing of international tribunal. It is for the third time Nuremberg Tribunal against Nazi Germany, then Tribunal on the war crimes in former Yugoslavia, now this. So it is important because it's about that it couldn't be impunity for such crime of crimes, crime of aggression. And it is about Russian political military leadership, and not only Russian, also Belarusian and North Korean. So it is an important moment. We clearly understand that this tribute, it will take maybe years. Also, we understand that for the moment, not like in Nuremberg, where Nazi Germany was already defeated, Nazi Russia is still not defeated, but in any way, it's right direction. We need to name villains. We need to name criminals. We need to name spades. We need to show to other aggressors that they will be taken to responsibility sooner or later. So that is an important moment. It will not have a direct influence of what's going on now on front line, but I hope it will make a difference and will have influence of what will happen in the world in the next decades. So it is important. And my job here was also to move this tribunal. So I'm happy to see that this process is on its way.
That's great to know. And is there one other issue that you think is really top of mind for Ukraine right now at PACE?
Like there are a lot of issues which are important. Recently here in PACE, 2 days ago, we adopted resolution on Ukraine, by the way, also addressing United States, asking to continue to support Ukraine and to put pressure on Russia. All that we spoke about, it was supported unanimously by Council of Europe, Parliamentary Assembly. I think that this is also an important signal. Also, we adopted my amendments, which I proposed were supported about Russian shadow fleet as a main source of Russian war chest. So these are important issues. And Council of Europe is the only organization, international organization, which kick off Russia from its members after the beginning of full-scale invasion. So I want to thank all our colleagues here in PACE for common work and for results.
I just want to ask one final question very briefly, and that is, what are you looking for now going forward? What do you feel should be the priorities for President Zelensky? What do you think should be the priorities for the United States, especially your counterparts here in the U.S. Congress and for European countries?
I think we have a chance to peace. We want peace as soon as possible in Ukraine. For this, we need to put pressure on Russia. This is the time. We can't wait anymore. And I hope this will be, and all Ukrainian diplomacy should be aimed on this. And I hope very much that we will have support of the United States. Without United States, it will not happen. But if it will not happen, that the question will be in the air. Is the United States country you can rely on? Is it a partner you can rely on? After all insurances, after Budapest Memorandum, where United States guaranteed Ukrainian territorial integrity and sovereignty, after Ukraine voluntarily gave up the third largest nuclear arsenal in the world. And after this, you just can't give up on Ukraine because it's not already about Ukraine, it's about United States itself. The world will be a much worse place to live in if we will not win this war.
Thank you so much, MP Honcharенko. It was really wonderful to have you here. We really appreciate your thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
This episode was hosted by me, Viola Ginger, and our guest host, Lauren Van Meter, and produced by Maya Neer with help from Isaac Rubenstein. Special thanks to MP Alexei Honcharенko. You can find more analysis of Russia's war on Ukraine on Just Security's website. If you enjoyed this episode, please give us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen.